Hello, everyone. Welcome back once again to another titillating edition of the Noise Brigade. I am Bobby. He is Tom. How the hell are you?
I'm alive. And, we just talked for like 30 minutes pre-recording, and I didn't want to say anything, but I'll say it here on a recording. I'm doing this feeling like I got kicked in the face because I had some dental stuff done today.
Ooh,
So if I sound funny, guys, or anything comes across as a little weird, I am plowing through this. So
all right. Well, hey, if it makes you feel any better, I got a migraine. So,
there we go. All right. So we're in this together.
yeah. So,
Um,
and it's a good, I mean, it's good that we're in pain for this one because we're going to talk about some Philly sports zeros. And I know that
yeah.
they've caused us some headaches in the past.
Yeah, this was a great one. This one you kind of stumbled on this idea with Ben Simmons, and we'll get to him. But we love our Philly sports heroes. And past, present. Hopefully we get some heroes in the future. Um,
Hopefully, it ain't looking like it.
hopefully, yeah, yeah. No, I miss the days of Nick Foles. Never thought I'd ever say that.
Yeah, right.
But we love our heroes. That's Philly is just known for that. But
Hey, let the
and
record show though, while we're talking about Nick Foles, I did own a Nick Foles jersey before he won us the Super Bowl.
there you go. There you go. See.
So that
Um,
that's how dedicated we are.
exactly. But as many heroes as there are, we're going to talk about some Philly sports zeros. And really, some of these we're going to kind of debate back and forth. Are they really zeros? Mm, that's to be seen. But there are some on here that are without a doubt straight up zeros, and I wonder if they're even ranked that high.
Yeah, for some of these guys, I'm thinking we might need to dip into the negatives, man.
Yeah, no, I almost went there with a few, and we'll get there. But let's crack into this. Let's just talk about. I guess these would be some like honorable mention Philly sports zeros.
Yeah,
Let's throw out some of these guys. Terrell Owens, more
dude,
affectionately known as T.O.
guy ripped my friggin' heart out. Ripped my heart
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
so with To, I remember I remember where I was. I was driving down the turnpike when my dad and I were talking on the phone because he had just heard that the Eagles had traded for him and they had signed Javon Curse. And I'm like, no, get out, get out. They did not. And then so I get off the phone with him. I turn on WIP because there was no other sports talk station in Philly at the time. And so I was listening and I was so excited, man. I was like, yeah, we're going to win the Super Bowl. We're going to win the Super Bowl. And a year later, he was one of the most despised villains in Philadelphia. And not only was he despised because he destroyed a Super Bowl, obviously we went to the Super Bowl and that whole season he was great and he got hurt and we were devastated. And then he came back and he had an amazing showing in the Super Bowl, but the Eagles lost and it all imploded from there. And then he comes back, tears the team apart. He's pulling his little stupid crap with his little press conferences, working out in his driveway. And then he destroys, he self destructs during the season. And then he ends up with the Cowboys.
yeah. Which
And
is insane to me. And I don't mean to cut you off on this, but if you recall when T.O. was a 49er, what was one of the most famous things that he did?
he stood on the star and he celebrated on the star. He ran out there and spiked the ball. And then he got hit by somebody. I don't remember who.
I don't remember who either, but standing on the star and then you play the time and you take or help take the Eagles to the Super Bowl, and all of a sudden you're a freaking cowboy.
Right. And then crying in that's my quarterback.
Ugh.
After all the crap that you put Donovan through. Now Donovan's another one that we can discuss, but whether right or wrong, the bottom line is you fractured that team because you couldn't man up, and McNabb has showed his ass since then. Like he's shown that he wasn't innocent at all in any of that, and I actually probably I won't say that I like To more than I like Donovan at this point, but where I used to hold McNabb in high regard, I don't anymore.
Yeah, yeah, there's been a lot of things that have come to light with him too, and I think you're right. You know, he's certainly one that would fit this mold. Um, but yeah,
But I mean,
To
and I remember I was in the parking lot because the Eagles played the Cowboys on my birthday in Philly. That was the first game that T.O. came back to Philly, as a member of the Cowboys. I remember getting to the stadium. We didn't have tickets, but we went to boo T.O. when the bus came by, threw eggs at the bus. I had T.O. bobbleheads that I got from Modell's for like $1. Along with I actually got a green and a white Eagles jersey, T.O. Ripped the Owens off the back, and I still use them to this day. Um, but we had golf clubs and TO bobbleheads, and we were hitting the heads off the bobbleheads with the golf club. We were burning bobbleheads, we were burning jerseys, and then we threw eggs at the Cowboys bus because it's Philly, and they're lucky that's all we threw at the bus. But and then we went back, watched the Eagles stomp out the Cowboys, and then went and saw Flogging Molly that night. So it was a good night.
There you go. All right, enough on To. Let's go another one, and this is a different direction to a point. But as we were kind of spitballing here, talking about these honorable mention, if you will, Philly Sports Zeros, oddly enough, one person that stuck in my head was Allen Iverson, more affectionately known as AI. And it was funny because it had nothing to do with, his play, his style of play. Very fit Philly very well, very hard nosed, very edgy. Hell, took us to the finals. I mean, what's not to like about the guy? But in hindsight, this is the reason why I thought about him on here, was if you really look back at some of the pressers that he gave and just his attitude overall, man, I said this to you earlier before we started recording this. I just don't know that that plays in 2021. And I'm not saying that in a sense of the world's changed or any of that stuff. I just don't know that I buy it, and I don't think he was necessarily the hero that he was for so many years. I think part of me thinks that, yeah, the guy's kind of a jerk.
Yeah, I mean, you could kind of see it. He had that now. Obviously, AI will never ever have to buy a drink or a meal in Philly just because of who he is. He's beloved by the fan base. But yeah, I feel like if he played in this era, I don't know if I see. I can go two ways on it. I mean, number one, the one thing I don't know how it plays out is the practice press conference where it famously said practice how many times and then just left. Um, but I don't know. I don't know if he tries to join up with a super team, or I don't know if he's the anti super team guy. And I don't know. I don't know how he would. He was never really on a team in Philly with another superstar. And with the way that the Sixers have been trying to build this team through the tank years and the draft picks, and then you had who were supposed to be your two main superstars in Embiid and Simmons, and then bringing in Jimmy Butler and JJ Redick and stuff like that. I I don't know. I don't know if he's. It's a very good question.
Yeah, and I think that's where my head was at on this. That was almost immediately what I thought of. I was like, you know what, the whole point of having this episode was really Ben Simmons, and he was the one that kind of brought this to light. What if you have Joel Embiid and Allen Iverson? I just really wonder that, and you know, I just think it's interesting to think about.
The one thing I will say is I think, with part of the issue with Ben Simmons is his reluctance to shoot, and you definitely didn't have that with AI.
No, no, that's all he did.
And so part of me says, you know what? Hey, shoot, he would have gotten along great with Embiid because they'd probably have a championship by now.
Yeah, and it's
But
very,
but I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah, exactly. And again, I have certainly no disdain for AI. He'll always remain one of my favorites. I just, as we thought about this, I thought, you know what? Maybe some people don't see him the same way that I do. Um, I still think he's kind of top of the mountain for me. And I even mentioned that on our last episode, talking about his uniform,
Right.
his jersey. But I just want, you know what I mean? It crept up in my mind. Like, would that play now? Would he play well with Embiid? And really looking back on it, I think he did, come across as, kind of brash and arrogant and kind of a jerk in some of his pressers. It's just, you know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
All right. Let's push back to football though, and another one that you mentioned him here, and this is interesting. It's a good one, Carson Wentz.
Yeah, see, and I had a discussion with one of my mom's friends who's a huge Eagles fan, like has an Eagles tattoo, is like diehard, you know, b- lives and breathes like we do. And we were discussing jerseys and, you know, what jerseys you could still wear after the player leaves, because it was in the wake of Zach Ertz, who we'll talk about, you know, in contrast to Carson Wentz. Um, Carson's not a guy who ingratiated himself to the fans, to the city on his way out of town. And by the end, he did it was just abundantly clear he did not want to be here. He didn't like the fans. He didn't like, he didn't like anything about the city, and he just wanted the heck out. Um, you know, and then even when he gets to his new, not to get into it too much, but you know, he gets to his new city and he doesn't ingratiate himself to his new city and his new teammates because of his reluctance to get vaccinated, and he ends up causing a big stir there right off the bat. And man, he just Carson to me is always he was never going to succeed once Nick Foles won that Super Bowl. He was never
Ah,
going to succeed in
yep,
Philly, no matter what he did. And I think as soon as that happened, he started to check out.
yep. No, you're 100% right, and quite frankly, you know, and I'm not again. I will not speak ill of anyone's health and how they play the game and whatever, but Carson Wentz was glass for us. And a granite, he was not very well protected.
Right.
The man was sacked many, many, many times, but um, he ended up injured from stuff like that
Yeah.
a couple times. So,
And I mean,
I,
honestly, like let's look at a couple of the seasons. So 2017, obviously off to an MVP start, gets hurt in LA. You know, fact matters, we don't win that Super Bowl without him leading the team the way that he did up to that Rams game. And even
right,
playing in the Rams game. We don't win the season, or we don't win the Super Bowl without him putting us in position. The next season he rushes, he comes back too soon. His back was still jacked up, and I will guarantee you that's where he was adjusting to his knee issue. He wasn't 100% healthy, but he was trying to rush back. And I'll give him all the credit in the world for that. Dude wanted to work. Dude wanted to get out there, put in the work, and lead his team. But he did it to his detriment, and he injured his back because his throwing motion was screwed up. And you could see it in his mechanics. They were off, and that ended up breaking the bone in his back. The next year he comes back and he's not quite Carson for the first little bit of the season. And then at the end of the season, he takes a bunch of no names and he ends up becoming the first Eagles quarterback in history to throw for 4,000 plus yards with guys that, you could bump into them at Wawa and not realize they were, right? Gets into the playoffs. All right, cool. He's made it to the playoffs. We got this. And then gets taken out by a cheap shot from Jadeveon Clowney, who, let me say this, should not even still be in the league. That's neither here nor there. And then after that, he comes back the next season. They had drafted Jalen Hurts. It got in his head, and he was done. He was cooked because he wasn't mentally strong enough to deal with the fact that, hey, there's another backup quarterback in here. Now I get it. Trust me. Taking JJ Arcega-Whiteside and Jalen Hurts, or I'm sorry, that was the Jalen Rieger year. Taking Jalen Rieger when you could have had Justin Jefferson, and then taking friggin' Jalen Hurts with your second round pick instead of getting more offensive or hell, even defensive help, not the smartest move in the world.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, not and certainly not for Wentz's long-term future in Philly. I mean,
right,
that but
right. But
look, I
I
mean,
get the need to have a solid backup quarterback. But I feel like there was a different way to go in that situation.
well, and honestly, and here's the other thing too, kind of a counterpoint to that, you know, quite possibly they already saw the writing on the wall with him. They're like, look, we need to draft us, even though Jalen obviously was, you know, one of those that could have been a hit or miss. Um, he proved himself enough in college to know that he was probably going to be a pretty darn good NFL quarterback. Um, so far, not really proving me wrong on that one. He's been pretty good so far as a starter. And
I think we
so
differ a little
far,
bit on that one.
I mean, better than what I thought. I'll say that.
Okay. All right. I can go with that.
I don't think that he's been anything spectacular. I'm not thinking that we're seeing like someone necessarily capable of, 12, 13 win seasons here, right off the bat. But I think he's proved himself to be pretty darn capable, better than I thought. And I'm really thinking that they had that same amount of thought when they drafted him because, as you mentioned earlier, Wentz checked out. And I think even after they drafted Hurts, that just happened way more. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just, that's my thought.
All right.
But all right, so let's move back to basketball, and then we'll dive into some of our. Well, actually, before we go into basketball, you mentioned Zach Ertz, kind of the
Yeah.
antithesis of Carson Wentz here. Zach Ertz, beloved by all, and it sucks that he was traded. But you and I called this. We were both shocked that he was even in a uniform this year.
Yeah. So Ertz, at the end of last season, or well, actually in training camp last year, you had a big blow up on the sideline with Howie Roseman, who, let's be honest, I'd love to punch Howie Roseman in his stupid face. And if I had my choice, he'd be the first one on the bus out of town after this. Well, I mean, let's fire him now so we can start the search, but he needs to be gone. Dude cannot do anything. He's good at managing the salary cap. But even that now we're starting to get in salary cap trouble. So his behind either needs to be back in that corner office that Jason Kelsey referred to in his famous Super Bowl speech, or he needs to be gone. End of story. But Zach Ertz ends up getting into a blow up. He thinks he deserves a new contract. He doesn't get it. He wants out of Philly. We don't acquiesce. He goes through the season. The last game of the season, he has a tearful press conference, says thank you and goodbye to everybody. It's pretty much a done deal that he's gone. The draft or free agency opens, free agency comes and goes. Zach Ertz is still an Eagle. The draft comes and goes. Zach Ertz is still an Eagle. Training camp comes and goes. Zach Ertz is still an Eagle. Zach Ertz then comes back, says, you know what? Because of this staff, because of the team, I've decided to, put it behind me. We're going to move forward. I love Philly. I love the fans. And then he ends up leaving a celebrated hero. He requests to stay. The trade was done before that game against Tampa, but he
Hmm.
wanted to stay and play in front of the Philly fans one more time before he left. You can't. And then he takes out a full page ad in the Inquirer to thank the fans. Dude, you can't handle it better than he did.
Yeah,
And he's one where I will never like I had some Carson Wentz McFarland figures. I threw them out. I have a Carson Wentz jersey and a Carson Wentz t-shirt. They're going to Goodwill as soon as I find them. I know they're in one of my bins. Um, you know, I will never ever be able to wear Carson Wentz memorabilia ever. And I've never gotten rid of Eagles jerseys. I keep them. Even my stupid Donovan McNabb ones, they're in there. I think the only jersey I've ever gotten rid of was a Sean Bradley jersey that I got.
Big
Um,
country.
yeah, like I, remember when he was going to be the future of the Eagles middle linebacker core? Yeah. Anyway, um, that's it. But Zach Ertz, you could wear Zach Ertz will be an Eagle forever. He will forever be beloved in this city, and that's never going to change now. because he
Yeah.
handled himself the right way on the way out of town. Not like Carson Wentz, not speaking to people, and he just disappeared. Carson Wentz was a little prima donna. See, I cleaned it up. That was nice.
There you go.
Um, it stayed to himself. And I guess, you don't have anything nice to say, you don't say anything at all. But you know what? You probably should have just sucked it up and said something nice so that you didn't look like a big giant baby.
Yeah. No. Not
All right, I'm a
wrong.
little
Not
fired
wrong.
up on that. Can you tell?
It's cool. It's cool. I like it. Makes for good podcasting here, sir. All right. Let's do one more honorable mention, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes here. Um, you threw this one out there, and it's interesting. Charles Barkley.
Yes.
Um,
And let me preface it. I love Charles Barkley, and in no way, shape, or form did he trash the fans when he left. He left kind of in a bad way because he did demand a trade. He wanted out, but he didn't trash the fans. And as far as going about demanding a trade, he did it the right way, I guess, if there is a right way to do something like that.
yeah, it's weird. I never once had any ill will for him in any regard on anything. Um, I've always enjoyed him. Uh, always thought post basketball that he's one of the funnier sports personalities.
Yes.
Um, it really across all sports. I just think he's a great commentator. He's a funny guy. Um, you know, I think because he was traded, even though he requested, demanded, whatever you want to put it, um, at a time when I was like 11 or 12, uh, hard for me really not to really think, I don't know what's going on. He was just the most famous Sixer for me for a while, and quite frankly, he was, you know, the Bulls had Jordan, the Celtics had Larry Bird, the Lakers had Magic Johnson, and we had Charles Barkley,
Yes.
so it was like I just didn't have anything bad, you know, but I could see how it left a bad taste in some people's mouths. I could see that.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's the thing. I remember that one. I have a very fond, well, not fond, but very vivid memory of hearing, of knowing when and where I learned about it. I was on Kings Highway in West Effort heading towards Woodbury because I was going to clean a business with my dad, and it came on WIP. And I remember saying to my dad, "You know what? I hope he does really well. I hope he goes to the Suns and they win the championship to rub it in the Sixers' faces." And my dad was like, "Why would you say that? The Sixers are your team." And I said, "Because the Sixers didn't do right by him." And I knew this even as a kid. I'm like, he's right. you know? And I was
right.
able to remove my Sixers fandom from it and just say, no, he's right. I'm not gonna. He's still awesome. I still want him to do well. So
Yeah. Okay. I think we've done some justice here to some different players. Maybe not justice, but we at least brought up some, what I call the honorable mention
dishonorable
of the
mention?
zeros. And I'm not saying they're complete zeros.
No,
It
no.
just they could have, like you said, demanding or requesting a trade, or maybe just rub somebody the wrong way with something they said, or whatever. Certainly kind of fits that mold. But let's get into some true zeros. And again, as I said, I'm not sure if they're even ranked that high. And first up here, former head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, Rich Kotite.
Oh my God.
And it's I hate to cut you there, but I posted on our Twitter feed a kind of a teaser picture. So if you're listening,
Yeah.
go back and check that out, and you can see why he's on this list.
Oh my God. Is there a more infuriating coach in Philadelphia sports history?
Hey, 8-8 is great.
I, dude, all right. Where do I begin with this guy? First of all, Rich, Rich Kotite, this friggin' stunad. He looks dumb. He looks dumb. Look at him. Look at him in his stupid sweater. Oh my god, I want to punch him in his stupid face. So he comes in and takes over for one of the most beloved coaches in Philadelphia Eagles history, in Buddy Ryan. Now we can get into whether or not Buddy Ryan deserves to be beloved. That's a whole nother show in and of itself, because he was mediocre as a head coach, great defensive mind, but you can't take away the fact that he won a Super Bowl with Mike Ditka in Chicago, and he built one of, if not the best defense that has ever graced the NFL. The first defense to ever finish first against the pass and first against the rush. The defense had how many superstars? Countless superstars. Reggie
Oh,
White, Andre Waters, Wes Hopkins, Eric Allen,
Jerome
Seth,
Brown, Clyde
Jerome
Simmons.
Brown, Seth Joyner, Byron Evans. It had all the. I mean, Mike Golick was there too. Um, it had all these dudes that were just out of their mind talented, and still didn't manage. Now, granted, there was some bad luck in there with the Fog Bowl in Chicago. Um, and again, that's another thing that we could have an entire show on, is whether or not that game should have even continued, or if it should have been delayed or whatever. But like, this dude, Buddy Ryan, gets fired basically because Norman Brayman was a cheap piece of crap and didn't have he did not care about the Philadelphia Eagles. He cared about the money that they raked in. And this guy was causing him too much problems, too many headaches. So he said, all right, we're going to get rid of him. We're going to replace him with Rich Kotite, who is like the most wet blanket, bland milk toast coach you could ever have. So what does Rich Kotite do? Rich Kotite comes in first season, does well because he's playing with Buddy Ryan's team. Then starts the exodus. The exodus begins. Reggie White leaves in free agency.
Green Bay.
Right. The next year, Seth Joyner and Clyde Simmons leave, and they go where? Oh, they went to the Cardinals, because guess who's the coach of the Cardinals now? Buddy Ryan.
Yeah.
And did Andre go to? I don't remember if Andre went to or not, but he was, so there's exodus of talent. Then they start getting people back, and the team is starting to do okay. And then they finish 8-8. And then they go, and this was what killed me. This taught me not to believe anything as a Philadelphia sports fan. They start off the season 7-2. They trounce the 49ers. Charlie Garner, as a rookie, goes off, has a game for the ages. I get a Charlie Garner jersey for my birthday. And then they go from 7-2, finish the season at 7-9, losing 7 straight games. And I remember losing to the Falcons and being like, God, the Falcons aren't even good. And we were 7-2. And dude, it's just, it was an abomination. It was a travesty. And the fact that he worked again in the NFL as a head coach after that drove me insane.
Yeah. And, there's some insane things about Kotite, too. I'm going to compare this to Buddy Ryan, which sucks. Kotite had one playoff win as the Eagles head coach. Buddy Ryan had none.
Right.
That's insane to me to think about, because I love Buddy Ryan.
Right.
And I absolutely hate Rich Kotite.
Absolutely.
It's crazy.
And his win, if I remember correctly, wasn't his win that one over the Lions where it was like 51-10 or something like that?
Yeah, it was crazy blowout. And I think they lost to Dallas in the
Yes.
next round. Yeah. So he was 1-1 as a playoff. And here's the crazy thing: 1-1 as his record in the playoffs as the Eagles head coach. 8 games over 500, 36 wins as the Eagles head coach. Really not bad numbers. But the insane thing is, you get the crap of, the thing that really, and I saw that I had to look up the year because I couldn't remember. But his quote, the "Hey, 8-8 is great. That
Right.
will never sit well with the Philly fan base. I don't give a
No.
crap who you are,"
No.
and certainly not coming from him. Um, and the funny thing is, the season before was the one where they were 11-5 and won the damn playoff game. So, yeah,
Right.
the other thing too, so I thought this was interesting because I'd forgotten about this, but then it's like, oh yeah, um, on his way out was when basically Jeffrey Lurie became the owner, and Lurie kind of pulled no punches and was like, basically, we're thinking about our head coaching, kind of hinting along where Kotite's not going to be around anymore.
Right.
He saw the writing on the wall. As much as we hate him, the guy's not stupid. Um,
Mm.
well, he might be stupid. He is stupid.
He's stupid.
But he at least he had it in the wherewithal of like, hey, I'm out of here. But then his dumb self makes fun of Jeffrey Lurie in an end season interview, and yeah, guess who's not coming back?
Right. And I got to correct myself. So it wasn't, and this is what makes this is going to make the whole thing even worse. So the it wasn't that Lions game where we racked up 50 some points. It was a game against the Saints in the Superdome where the Eagles were down at the half and ended up storming back and winning the game. So not only was his one playoff win was a great win too. It's not like they didn't make adjustments at halftime and come back out and they did. They made adjustments at the half and they came out and won. And he's still just a crap bag of a
Yeah,
coach.
yeah,
And I mean, I guess it's telling who he went and coached after that because he just drove up the turnpike and he was working for the Jets for 2 years.
Jets.
Suck, suck, suck.
Yeah, yeah. It made a lot of sense that he ended up there, and I'm
Yeah.
actually kind of surprised he's not the head coach now. Still there.
Hey man, he might be their quarterback soon.
Yeah, it's very possible. All right, let's get off football. Let's move to baseball here.
Yes.
And really these were ones that this came to mind almost immediately for somebody that never even put on the uniform, but is still a Philly Sports Zero or less uh, every single day. And I don't think anything's ever changed. So unless you were born post 1997, this guy has to be at the front of your mind. JD Drew. Uh,
Oh God, I
yeah,
hated him.
yeah. And I'm going to say this too, that look, the guy really started off on the wrong foot with the fact that he had Scott friggin' Boris as his agent.
Yes.
That's going to be a problem no matter who you are.
Yeah.
Um, whatever. And props to Scott for milking his way through and making millions and millions of dollars. But at the same point, you're a jerk.
Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, I hate Scott Boris too. He's somebody, and I hope anytime that we would be talking about free agency and we would be talking about somebody that's a Scott Boris agent or a Scott Boris client, I was kind of like, yeah, let's not talk to that guy. Let's
Yeah,
stay away.
exactly.
There's
And
certain agents that get that reputation, like Drew Rosenhaus. I
yep.
didn't want any Drew Rosenhaus clients, and if somebody signed with Drew Rosenhaus, I was like, oh, come on, really?
And here's the crazy thing. So the Phillies picked JD Drew, number 2 overall in the 1997 MLB draft. And then they set this insane price for him. And I say they, meaning Scott Boris and JD Drew himself, probably more Scott than JD, but that's another argument for another day. Um, in 1997, he would not sign less for $10 million, which is insane.
Right,
It's still kind of insane now, but then it was like asking for 100 million.
right. $1 billion.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was unheard of the kind of money that he was asking for back then. And they did that on purpose. He never wanted to play in Philly.
No.
That was set on purpose, so they would never. The Phillies came back and said, "We'll sign you for like 2.5 or whatever it was million." It was 2.6 or something like that, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly. Um, he doesn't sign. He goes back and he plays in independent ball that year. I think is what happens, if I remember correctly. But he goes and gets drafted again and signed. Ends up in St. Louis in 1998. And I thought this is the funniest thing. He get he signs for under $10 million.
Oh, of course.
And from what I gather, and I was trying to look it up under the contract websites, and a Baseball Reference has a salary thing, and um, there was another contract site I was looking at. That 7 million was either over 3 or 4 years, and I couldn't figure it out because there was like bonuses and whatnot
Right.
involved. But yeah, it wasn't that he just got his 10 million bonus. No, he got seven over 3 or 4 years.
Right.
So it's like, yeah. So now we definitely know you set that high, so you didn't want to play at the Phillies.
Right.
Like, yeah. Um, and I look back at that kind of money. I'm going to say this on contrast, and I've mentioned this guy before, talking on our podcast here. Salvador Perez is one of my favorite players. He's a catcher for the Kansas City Royals, and I certainly think that he's a future Hall of Famer. In 2012, he signed a contract extension, not a contract, a contract extension in 2012 at 5 years and $7 million. The same money, more years than JD friggin' Drew. And the guy ends up being basically going to be a Hall of Famer. I say that because it kind of paints a picture of who JD Drew actually became. I'm not saying that he became a junk baseball player, but his career certainly did not pan out the way that him and Boris thought it was going to.
No, not even a little bit. Not even a little
Um,
bit.
so what's your memories about him and like the batteries and stuff?
I that's the thing. I don't really remember. I remember hearing stories about it, but I never really necessarily believed it. Um, because I chalked it in like I mean you've got a note here, becomes it's almost like a joke about Philly fans throwing batteries at him, throwing snowballs at Santa. I honestly don't. I figured it was just like an exaggeration that people used to use to make Philly fans look bad. Um, so to me, I don't know, man. That never really stuck with me. What I will say is I did in every single video game that I ever played, baseball video game, I did throw at him every time he came up to bat.
As well, you should have.
Him and our next guy.
Yeah. So the next guy,
This
and
one hurt.
this was crazy, and this one made a lot of sense knowing, and I'm going to read a quote. This is a quote directly from Scott Rowland. I looked at this whole thing. I looked at history. I looked at the whole deal. And let's start with the facts. Let's go back 15 years. 13 times in the last 15 seasons, the Phillies have had losing seasons. That's history. That's facts. And that's a 15-year period. That's a long time. That was a Scott Rowland quote. Scott Rowland, most famously for us anyway, was our third baseman.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not going to say that he was the second coming of Mike Schmidt, but that's how he was heralded for quite some time, particularly coming up through the system
Exactly.
and for us growing up. And talk about somebody that turned from hero to zero in about 5 years flat.
Yep.
Well, 6 years, I guess. Yeah. Ooh, what's your recollection on Roland? Because I don't have anything fond of this guy
Dude, I
at
have
all.
fond for a little bit. I have fond memories of him, like you said, the heir apparent, the well, not heir apparent, but because they were separated by quite a few years, but he was the second coming of Schmidt, like you said. And I remember being so excited. I actually still have a baseball signed by him that I got, I think his rookie year. Um, dude, he was so good. He was my favorite Philly. I was so excited to have him on the team. I remember playing baseball. I yelled at an ump. because they made a terrible call. And and then I came back to the dugout because I got called out and I was pissed and I was yelling the whole way back to the dugout. And then I slammed my helmet down. And my dad comes over and he goes, "Yo, Scott Rowland would not do that." And I'm like, "All right, you're right. You're right." And I said, "You know what? Actually, I think my response was, if he had a bullshit call like that from an ump, he would." but but that's neither here nor there. But no, man, I remember he was awesome. Like I was so happy to have him in the red pinstripes, and he was going to be the future of the team. And any success we had was going to be predicated on having him at third base. He was locked in, and we just needed to figure out the rest of the roster. Um, and then that's how it was until it wasn't. And when it
Yeah.
wasn't, it got bad quick, because not only did he crap on the organization, but it felt like a direct middle finger to the fans that came and supported him and cheered him on. And there wasn't a whole heck of a lot to like about the Phillies when Scott Rowland was there. He was the bright spot. And
Oh
we
yeah.
kept hoping that they would build around him and build around him and build around him. And you could see it in the draft. You know, they were building, they were picking up those pieces and putting them in place and getting stuff ready, but he just wasn't patient enough.
No, and that's yeah. I'm not going to say that in hindsight that he's wrong about the Phillies weren't doing enough to win, and Larry Bow was the manager at the time that he got traded, and he certainly was not seeing eye to eye with him. Um, and again, I'm not going to claim that he saw the future. Obviously, he didn't. But the Phillies were building. They were building hard, because if you look at the 5 previous years that he was there and people that they drafted, all these guys ended up winning a ring in '08. Cole Hamels and Ryan Howard and Chase Utley and Brett Myers and Pat Burrell. And that's not to mention people that were already there, Jimmy Rollins. We can talk about that. These people were there, they were in the system. And I'm sorry, and this is another episode. I will always say that Ed Wade was a friggin' genius. Um, he's the one that built it, and people like Roland didn't see it. And again, said hindsight. I'm not saying he was wrong, because back then the Phillies were terrible. Um, we really didn't have any bright spots there. He's right. He was the guy. But this is the thing that I think it's funny with him. Had he stuck around and history plays itself out, maybe it plays itself out even better because he's there.
Right.
Um, and I'm not knocking Pedro Feliz and whoever else we had at third base.
David Bell.
Eric Bruntlett.
Eric Bruntlett. Eric freaking Bruntlett. The Brunt.
But the funny thing is, Roland wanted out because he wanted to win. And he ends up showing up in the playoffs just as many times and winning just as many World Series rings as the Phillies did his entire run in baseball with St. Louis and Cincinnati.
Right.
Shows up in the playoffs 5 times and wins 1 World Series, and that's exactly what Philadelphia did. I think it's funny.
It is. And you got to wonder, number one, if he stays with the Phillies, does it accelerate their window?
Yeah, I
Number
think it
two,
does. I think '06 it really hits. Maybe even '05 if he's there, but
right.
'06 for sure. Then I just if '06 and he's there, '07 they're winning the World Series or close to it.
Right. Or
'08
even
definitely.
if it
And
plays out where, 07 we get into the playoffs, '08 we win. '09, is he the difference that
yeah,
puts us over the Yankees?
yeah, yep. And even look at 10, because he's back in the playoffs himself in 10, but we shut him down pretty good, didn't we?
Yeah. Yes, we did.
I don't know. It sucks because I remember going to Reading and seeing him play in Double-A ball there, and I really liked him from day one because I honestly thought that this was like, I didn't get to see Mike Schmidt play as a youth because it was a generation before me. But I got to see this guy, Scott Rowland, and I thought, well, this is our Mike Schmidt. And then half a dozen years later, to completely just dump on the fan base, I've got no time for this guy at all.
No, no. And that's another reason why, along with JD Drew, whenever I played against Scott Rowland in any baseball game, I threw at him.
And as well, you should have again. So,
So maybe I'm just feeding into that negative Philadelphia stereotype, but I wasn't throwing batteries. I was throwing baseballs. I mean,
virtual
yeah,
baseballs.
maybe I threw him at his head, but it was a video game. It's pixels. He's not actually hurt.
No.
Probably.
That's just like a voodoo doll.
Yeah.
JD Drew voodoo doll. All right. Main event time here. The whole reason why we're doing this and the current issue at hand with a Philly Sports Zero. Who you got?
Ben freaking Simmons.
Yeah. Boy, this is a complicated one. This is something that's been stewing all of 2021, hasn't it?
It has. And honestly, I'm going to take it back as far as 2020, as I think when the seeds started being planted, or we can probably, honestly, what it seems like is it can go back to when we had Jimmy Butler. I don't think that Ben Simmons appreciated having Jimmy Butler in here. I don't think that he appreciated having a guy like JJ Redick in here. And I think it's just gone on, and it's just been bubbling under the surface and bubbling under the surface. And then finally in 2021, in the playoffs last year, it just came to a head. I mean, well, it built up through the season, and then it came to a head in the playoffs where Ben just didn't want to shoot, man. Ben, I don't know what got into his head, but it was almost like he was afraid of failure. And he was afraid to fail. He was afraid to miss shots. And so he figured, well, if I don't shoot, then I can't miss. So we're just going to do that. We're not going to shoot. And obviously his team didn't really dig that too much. And then he's got to come out and start talking crap on everybody. And the team has done nothing but bend over backwards to accommodate him, to make him the center of the team. They got rid of Jimmy Butler. They got rid of JJ Redick. They've gotten rid of people to make him comfortable and to customize the team to his liking. And it just hasn't worked. And he's just been a baby about the whole thing.
Yeah. And there's these different things that he did too, that I just, he took himself out of the Olympics. He pulled himself out to focus on individual skill development. Look, if
what
I
skill?
was
Texting,
I guess, look, if I'm ever honored enough to represent a country, my country, whatever country, to do anything in the Olympics, I'm going to try my absolute hardest to do it. But you know what? I'm just going to take myself out to focus on making myself better. Just doesn't sound good on paper. Because that's how he's been the entire time. It's always been about him. Like you said, I think you're dead on with the Jimmy Butler stuff. I don't think he liked him there at all. Particularly stealing any spotlight. But yeah, you can have a lot of big, time players on one team, and you can excel. Other teams have done it, but yeah. And then we start getting into the beginning of this season. He wants to be traded. And guess what doesn't happen? We go through July, we go through August. Maybe the asking price is a bit high, and just nothing comes out. And it's kind of a, if I'm not traded, I'm not going to report to camp. And where are we at now with him?
So last I saw with him, he showed up to practice and then didn't wear his gear, sat in the corner and played on his phone. And and then he got suspended for the first game and kicked out of practice. And now, they're playing, and he hasn't suited up. He's just kind of it's kind of at the point now where the Sixers are like, no, we're not going to blink, man. We're just going to hold on to you. And if we got to hold on to you until your contract runs up and you never play basketball for us again, well, I guess that's a thing that happens. But the way that they're looking at it, and it's the right way, in my opinion, they're saying that Ben Simmons is a difference maker on the court. And they're not going to trade a difference maker for pieces.
Right.
They're going to
Yeah.
trade, apples for apples. So you're getting a difference maker from us. We're getting a difference maker back. If not, that's cool. We'll wait because we know what his value is.
Yeah. No. And that's the crazy thing. It's like, somebody with this much drama and this much baggage, years past would have been unloaded for a draft pick or something, of non-value, just because they were that much of a head case. But the Sixers understand it. There's just something there that he just does not mesh with the team. And they're not wrong. I mean, get the value.
Right.
And my only thought on that is hopefully it doesn't drag out any longer than it already has, because unfortunately, with anything, that value becomes a little bit less every day. So I'm hoping that something comes to fruition here, and I mean, I don't know who we'd end up with, but somebody that could at least show up on the court.
I mean, look, honestly, as far as I'm concerned, dude can sit and rot. I'm of the mindset where, you know what, all right, so we're probably at the point now, I would figure, where we're probably not going to get anything of value for him. So at this point, waste him. Absolutely just waste him. And then it's his own fault when he can't sign a max deal. We signed him to a max deal. The next team that he's going to sign with, his value is going to be so diminished, he's only hurting himself at this point. So, you know what? Cool. Good job. This is what you did to yourself. We've got sunk cost. So to us, yeah, part of me's like, you know what? Get what we can for him. But on the other hand, I'm sick and tired of teams being held hostage by these brat players. Because that's what they are.
Yeah.
They're acting like spoiled brats. And it's
Yep.
time they got put in their place.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. I mean, that's it's an unfortunate fact of where we're at now. And it's funny, some of these people that we mentioned talking about before, these brats have been around for quite some time. I mean, JD Drew, we talked about him. 20 was 97. So I mean, yeah, look how many years ago that was.
Right.
20 plus years ago. And you know, these prima donnas, they've always been around. And the dislikes one way or the other for certain ones, the Allen Iversons of the world. But then you end up with, where you're at now with this whole Ben Simmons thing, and it's disgusting that they even have to deal with it. Do your job, earn your millions, play the game with your team. I don't know how hard that is.
Right.
I just don't.
And
I don't understand.
above and beyond that, how hard is it to not trash your teammates and to not trash the city and the organization and everything? You
Because
know?
I can tell you right now, in the real world, if you sat there and gave a press conference about trashing your coworkers, you'd be fired.
Right. Right.
I
And we're
mean,
not making millions of dollars.
no.
I mean, that's what kills me is, all of them, every sport is clearly overpaid, you know? And I mean, if you're talking like the minor leagues and stuff, no, those guys aren't getting overpaid. But the pros, it's gotten way out of hand. And you know, to see, so that's why it's good. And you see guys like Jason Kelsey. Jason Kelsey comes out and he trashes Ben Simmons. And then you've got some clown, Jason Kelsey's a Pro Bowler. He's won a Super Bowl. He's one of the best offensive linemen of all time who plays in this city. And you got that clown receiver down in Dallas who I think has like 18 career catches. And he says, "Oh, that's cornball behavior to come out and talk about it." You know what, man? You know what's cornball behavior? Being a no one on a team and coming out and saying that Ben Simmons is right. I mean, then again, I guess we're no ones and we're talking about it. So, but we're also not getting paid millions of dollars and acting like little babies.
Exactly, exactly. But now it's interesting, and I just kind of hope it works out for the Sixers in the sense of, hey, at least let's try to, I can't say completely ruin somebody, but at least let's try to get somebody back on the court, because right now he's doing nothing for us. So, I would love to see some kind of trade worked out, but we'll see.
Right.
Was there anything else you had on this one? Because I think that I think we did a good one here.
Yeah, I think that kind of wraps it up. I mean, it's a shame when it comes down to it. It's a shame that it's happening because, there was so much potential with the duo of Embiid and Simmons, and to see it kind of crumble and end like this is sad. And it I wish it would have worked out, but unfortunately, you need both players to want it to work out, and Ben Simmons just doesn't seem. He seems like he wants to be. I mean, as far as I know, last time I checked, or last time I had heard anything, he was dating one of the Jenners. So it may just be that he wants to be traded over to the West Coast so he can be closer to them. And honestly, if he's dating a Jenner, then I probably don't want him on the Sixers anyway. Uh, but it's just one of those things where it sucks. It's
Yeah,
the whole thing, just the whole situation sucks.
Ben apparently didn't trust the process,
No, no, he didn't.
but he
Oh,
trusted
and
the Jenner. So
yeah, he's not dating a Jenner anymore. He's dating somebody named Maya Jama, who apparently is from the BBC.
hmm, sounds like a phone app.
Yeah, yeah, it does. Download Maya Jama today. Is that going to be our new? Is that going to be our new sponsor, Maya Jama?
I hope so.
Yeah. Well,
Sounds like a fun game.
probably not anymore after we just made fun of her boyfriend. I almost said girlfriend, but
Whatever.
yeah, whatever.
Bye,
All right.
Ben.
So until next time, we have been the Noise Brigade. Don't forget to check us out at doublewidecoffin.com. You can check us out on the Facebook and on the Twitter machine.